Hello, I'm Lee Majors. A miracle is often thought of as a heavenly event. So are technological discoveries, such as bionics, something I've had a little experience with. Today, we'll look at documented cases that have changed the lives of some very special people. Our first story could be defined as an intervention of the Most High. Can one man harness this blissful power to turn a crippling disease into a crowning achievement? In our journey through life, there's often so much we take for granted. Frequently, it isn't until catastrophe strikes that we realize just how precious every aspect of life is. The most difficult lesson was recently learned by Robert Skillman of Red Bluff, California. After exercising one day, Robert noticed a tingling in his hands. Initially, he thought nothing of it, but then the sensation spread to the rest of his body.
At first, when everything felt like it was going to sleep, I kept thinking it's going to wake up, rubbing, it's going to wake up, and it didn't wake up. It went to sleep and died.
Robert underwent tests, the results of which were evaluated by his physician, Dr. Don Nelson. Robert's x-rays showed a grave abnormality.
I think anybody that looked at him would say, this man's in big, big trouble.
Robert had developed a condition which caused an overgrowth of bone and tissue in his vertebrae.
This white material, between the two lines of white material is the spinal cord, and then you get up to this point and the spinal cord appears to almost disappear. This is really very severe cervical stenosis.
In layman's terms, Robert's spinal cord was being crushed by abnormal growth, and by the time he was diagnosed, Robert had lost all feeling from the neck down. Recommended treatment included surgery to relieve pressure on the spinal cord, followed by intense physical therapy. The surgery was performed, but the limits of Robert's medical coverage prohibited therapy. Sadly, without it, he would never fully regain the use of his body. Until this point, Robert had handled his misfortune well, but this unexpected turn was more than he could bear.
I raged against God for letting this happen. What have I done to deserve this? I raged against the state for not providing me physical therapy, at least giving me a hope of getting better.
Robert's anger became grief, and his grief turned into self-pity. He was on a downward spiral that seemed endless. He knew the pattern had to stop, so he decided to do the one thing he still could do without help. He prayed.
My prayers were, at first they were gripe sessions. I griped and complained. Finally, there was a point of complete surrender. I said, God, if this is your will, to let me lie here a vegetable for the rest of my life, if that is your will for me, then give me the strength to accept that. And if you cannot give me the strength to accept that, then I will not be satisfied unless you heal me.
Robert prayed for a miracle, as did his congregation and pastor.
I knew that God could heal, and that physicians had treated, and he had very competent surgeons, but we would leave the healing part to God.
But even with prayers, Robert's condition continued to deteriorate.
For a period of time, it seemed to actually get worse after surgery rather than better. And then there was a rather sudden improvement about 6 months after surgery.
This sudden improvement was nothing less than the miracle for which everyone prayed. For no apparent earthly reason, Robert showed signs of movement in his arms and legs. With great difficulty, he was soon able to stand. And over time, with some assistance, the former quadriplegic walked. Though not exactly the person he used to be, Robert made phenomenal progress. Together with his congregation, he thanked God for his miraculous recovery. But God wasn't finished with Robert yet. The following week, he returned to church, this time without his walker. Robert had been completely healed. His friends were astonished. He was literally a walking miracle. Looking back on the experience, Robert now understands why he was prohibited from receiving physical therapy.
God allowed me not to have it so that he could get the glory. I was denied physical therapy so that when I was completely restored, not just partially restored, completely restored, human beings, especially medical science, could not say that they had anything to do with the restorative process other than the initial stabilization.
Robert's amazing experience has taught him three things.
First of all, it has taught me that God is absolutely sovereign. He can do anything he wants whenever he wants to. Secondly, a person doesn't have to be good or holy or righteous to receive a miracle. Now, I know this empirically because I'm none of those things, and I got a miracle. The third thing I've learned is that when God does a miracle, when he directly intervenes in a person's life, it's for a reason.
Robert believes God's plan for him involves a life of prayer.
Been able to pray for others for special healing before, but since my own miracle, it's nothing less than astounding. In gratitude for what God has done for me, I'm going to continue praying for others.
Robert has recently organized a group which meets weekly to pray for the healing of the sick and to share the message of miracles. Needless to say, Robert is a dedicated believer in the power of prayer.
The people who have been touched by this power know that it is the real thing and that it is from God.
The magnitude of Robert's miracle is extraordinary, but the greater miracle is in the method used to attain it, a method available to us all. The power of prayer turned tragedy into triumph and gave Robert a second chance at life. And as he continues along life's journey, it can be certain he will relish every precious moment and never again take anything for granted. The stories we just saw dealt with great inspiration and faith. These are the true miracles of the soul. Now, many skeptics claim that one's psychic ability or faith in God is nothing more than mind over matter, better known to us as physician, heal thyself. But there is a great amount of truth in that. But still, there are those moments when something unexplainable takes over where logic leaves off. It's at this point that mind over matter doesn't apply, and the real miracle stems from the power beyond our control. A man is nearly killed in a horrible accident and is rushed to a hospital where doctors valiantly perform life-saving procedures. But their efforts are sadly in vain. As death rapidly approaches, the doctor consoles the man's family and tells them that all they can do now is pray. But what is the doctor basing his advice on? Does he truly believe prayer can do what medical science couldn't? Or is he just mouthing an empty cliche? Traditionally, physicians have scoffed at the notion of prayer as a treatment option for their patients. But today, that tradition is being undone by former Chief of Staff at Medical City Dallas Hospital, Dr. Larry Dawsey, who is sending shockwaves through the medical community with his news that prayer indeed does work.
We've always said that there isn't any proof that prayer works. If you want to believe in prayer, you're on thin ice. There isn't any proof, and belief is just a matter of faith and fantasy. I think the proof that prayer works is one of the best-kept medical secrets going.
In his book, Dr. Dawsey outlines over 130 studies which prove there is power in prayer. But the doctor wasn't always a believer.
When I went to medical school, I became your self-respecting agnostic, and I stayed that way for many, many years. And I, like all well-trained physicians who believed in the power of science and objectivity, knew that the only way to solve medical problems was through drugs and surgical procedures and through things that you could basically hold in your hand and see.
But later, Dr. Dawsey was forced to question his steadfast convictions.
I will never forget an incident that happened to me the first year I was in medical practice, which really knocked my socks off. This patient of mine was dying from lung cancer. He refused all treatment. The only thing that he got in terms of therapy was that his congregation from the church ringed his bedside during all visiting hours and prayed nonstop for the man. I sent him home to die because he didn't choose to have any therapy.
1 year later, Dr. Dawsey learned the man was back at the hospital with a bad case of the flu. Amazed the patient had not succumbed to his disease, Dawsey, with great curiosity, examined the man's current x-rays.
The radiologist report said, in the intervening 12 months, this man has had a dramatic response to therapy. The chest x-ray is now normal. The radiologist assumed that the man had had chemotherapy or some medication which made this cancer go away. I knew that the only therapy that the man had was prayer. This case disturbed me a lot.
Though having been a witness to a miracle, the doctor was still a doctor.
I didn't want anything to do with this prayer business. I really got involved in it, sort of kicking and screaming against my better medical judgment, and the thing that helped me more than anything was science.
Ironically, the spiritual answers for which Dr. Dawsey was searching lay amongst the same scientific journals which initially caused him to reject prayer.
I went to a lot of trouble and work to uncover these studies, and I was stunned by the depth and the breadth of this evidence. The most famous study involving prayer has gone on at San Francisco General Hospital.
The study involved 393 people who had all suffered heart attacks. Patients were given comparable, state-of-the-art care, but some also received care of a supernatural nature.
Half of these people, unknown to them, have their first names farmed out to various prayer groups around the country who pray for them. And when the results were in, it looked as if the prayed for group had been given some sort of special advantage.
Special indeed, because those patients who had been prayed for were incredibly 3 times less likely to develop complications, 5 times less likely to require antibiotics, and had a consistently higher survival rate than those patients who were not remembered in prayer.
The most remarkable thing that has happened in the study of prayer is simply the finding that it works. That's got to be major medical news in this century.
Experiments have also been conducted on animals, plants, and even bacteria.
We can show in these very delicate studies that prayer works not on human beings, but on these lower organisms. This is really important because the skeptics say that if prayer works, it's just a matter of positive thinking and the effects of suggestion and expectation.
But clearly, animals, plants, and bacteria cannot respond to suggestion and positive thinking as we do. So what's the answer? How does prayer work?
I think sooner or later we probably will have a scientific explanation for prayer, but it's only fair to say we don't have one yet. We often have had therapies in medicine which we used before we knew how they worked. Penicillin is a great example. When penicillin was discovered, we didn't have a clue how it worked, but we knew that it worked. And we didn't let the lack of a theory stand in our way of using it. It's the same with prayer.
There are basically 2 ways to pray: praying for oneself and praying for others. We asked Dr. Dawsey if he became ill, which method he would use.
Since we know they both work, if I were sick, I would use both. And I personally would get on as many prayer lists as I could.
Dr. Dawsey isn't the only practitioner who has accepted this alternative form of healing.
A recent survey has shown that 43% of physicians in the United States actually pray for their patients. Now, most of my colleagues wouldn't be caught dead praying in public. My hunch is that when the information supporting it scientifically becomes better known, it will be widely used and probably publicly by physicians. And as they do so, medicine as we know it will never be the same.
Will this earth-shaking information become accepted and utilized publicly by the medical community, as Dr. Dawsey surmises? With so many physicians already giving credence to this supernatural power as a healing tool, it seems likely that doctors, in addition to medication, will also one day prescribed prayer, the ultimate miracle cure. As we've seen, miracles can happen anywhere, but surely not in a more fitting backdrop than within the walls of the house of God. That's where this story takes us. Many are made of stone, others are constructed of wood. A few have been fashioned from glass and steel. Arguably, some of the most beautiful structures ever designed by man. These are the places where the world over, the faithful go to honor God, to praise Him, to ask Him to intervene in those situations where only He can make a difference. But are churches and other houses of worship more than just stone or wood or glass? Often upon entering one of these holy sanctuaries, a certain reverence or awe is experienced. Is it purely the building's beauty which evokes these feelings? Or is it possible that by being within the sanctified surroundings, one is actually able to more clearly recognize and draw upon the divine power of God? In New Mexico, situated in the Valley of Miracles, there exists a church which, though dwarfed in size by its more majestic cousins, is a giant in terms of its popularity as a center for answered prayer. El Santuario de Chamayo has been called the Lords of America because, like the shrine in France, this church is a place where divine healings occur. The only difference is, at Lourdes, water helps to bring about miraculous cures. At El Santuario, the healing agent seems to be the very ground upon which the church itself is built. The history of the little chapel dates back to 1810, when one night, according to legend, two men saw a brilliant light emanating from beneath the earth. Frightened, but strangely drawn to the sight, the men began digging to find out what was causing the eerie glow.
And they found this precious, beautiful crucifix. The way you look right there at the altar now is the same of when they was first found. And you are impressed, never have been restored.
There were several conflicting stories as to how the cross came to be there. Some speculated it was buried in the earth by human hands. Others believed it was placed there by God Himself. No matter how the mysterious crucifix found its way to the spot, the local people knew the discovery was significant.
Then immediately the word spread, and they start coming, especially the Indians, because they said the holy ground where the crucifix was found. And then start the cures, instant cures.
Surprisingly, after praying at the site, people found they felt renewed, not only spiritually, but physically as well. The locals began to believe that along with their prayers, it was the dried earth in which the crucifix had been buried that brought about these physical renewals. Recognizing this as hallowed ground, the families in the area decided to erect a monument.
They built a little chapel right in the place where about 200 years have been coming people to pray and to pick some dirt, because this is a holy ground.
On the altar of the church is the old crucifix. In another part of the chapel is a room filled with crutches, canes, braces, and notes, left by the countless people who have been supernaturally restored to health. Beyond this space is an enclave, which is warmed by a small galaxy of candles. In the floor of the room is a pocito, or little well, full of blessed earth. It is here that people come to touch the dust and pray for miracles. Over the years, Albino, Ernestine, and Pita Trujillo have received several miracles at El Santuario de Chamayo. The first occurred when daughter Pita was just 2 years old.
She was already walking and everything. And then all of a sudden, I don't know what happened to her legs, that she couldn't walk. So we took her to doctors in Santa Fe and then everywhere. Every doctor that they told us, we took her.
But when the doctors were unable to explain the child's sudden paralysis, Mrs. Trujillo decided to turn elsewhere for help.
And I told my husband, well, I think I'm going to take her to Santuario. And we went to the Santuario, and I put her in the little pocito, and I put her in, and I rubbed her legs, and I did all kinds of crosses in her forehead and everything. And we prayed and we stayed there for a while. Then we left.
The Trujillos then took Pita home.
We were there talking when all of a sudden she got down she was on my lap, and she got down and started walking.
Pita was no longer crippled. Amazingly, less than 1 hour after the sacred soil was rubbed on her useless legs, the young child was healed. We wondered if the Trujillos had expected their daughter to ever walk again.
Well, we did, but we weren't expecting her to right away.
Could it have only been the dirt that made a crippled child walk? Or was it something more? Pita herself credits much of her miracle to her parents' steadfast belief that God could and would heal her.
They have very strong faith, and I'm glad they do. I'm walking today. Very strong faith.
Each year, more than 500,000 people visit El Santuario de Chamayo, and when they leave, visitors are welcome to take some of its special soil with them. But because the dirt never seems to run out, some believe the soil not only has miraculous healing powers, they think it has the ability to supernaturally replenish itself as well. In actuality, the way the little well always stays full is far less mystical.
I buy this dirt, tons, a big truck, every year, one or two trucks. But I bless this dirt. Blessing. Lord, give your power to the faith of these people. Give them what they ask in the power of Christ. I have faith in this, but not in the dirt itself. The good prayer and the feelings of the people.
So ultimately, the priest blesses the soil, which then believers use to enrich and make their faith grow strong. A seemingly simple equation, but obviously one which is having a tremendous amount of success here at El Santuario de Chamayo, in the Valley of Miracles. This is a story of a special nature. For most children, the process of growing up is a difficult challenge, filled with its share of hardship and heartache. But for children burdened with disabilities, the process is a battle. In their struggle to succeed, today these young warriors are not alone. Fortunately, there's an outlet to help turn their tragedy into triumph. What an inspiration. There are few experiences as wonderful as the birth of one's child. But what happens when that child is deemed imperfect? What do you do when the doctors tell you your son or daughter will never be normal? In 1981, Mark and Margaret Silva were expecting a child. When Margaret gave birth, she was told her daughter, Brandy, had only a 50-50 chance of survival. And if Brandy did pull through, there was little hope for any kind of quality in her life.
The top neurologist on the West Coast at 4 months gave us the prognosis of take her home and love her. She will never get out of her crib. She'll never walk. She'll never talk. She'll never function. And when she gets too big to care for, then put her in an institution.
Brandy was born with microcephaly, which means her brain was smaller than average. She was legally blind, legally deaf. She had psychomotor retardation and severe weakness on her right side. The possibility of Brandy ever doing anything normally was non-existent. But there was one possibility the doctors hadn't counted on: a miracle. 14 years have passed since Brandy's first prognosis, and not only has she survived, she's become a champion athlete in the Special Olympics. Mrs. Silva attributes her daughter's remarkable recovery to God and to Brandy's involvement in the Special Olympics organization.
With 90% of the Lord's help and 10% of hard work and dedication by her family and friends, she's gone from this zucchini, and I quote zucchini from the neurologist when she was 4 months old, to an athlete who does gymnastics.
Debbie Hicks has been coaching Brandy for 4 years now and has seen her grow tremendously during that time.
When I first started coaching Brandy, she was quiet. She did not know what a balance beam was. She didn't know what uneven bars were. She didn't know what a vault was. She didn't know anything about gymnastics. Basically, she could not walk a straight line.
But now, Brandy not only competes in multiple gymnastic events, she participates in several other sports as well. In 1994, she was selected as Female Athlete of the Year and received an award from Special Olympics Chairman Rayford Johnson. Another young man who has benefited greatly from the Special Olympics is Doug Hedenberg. Born with Down syndrome, Doug is a gold medal basketball star and has won additional gold medals in powerlifting, softball, track and field, and floor hockey. But Doug wasn't always such an all-around athlete.
For a number of years when he was smaller and younger, he wasn't particularly interested, but he made friends with other kids and they got him interested. And he's been very pleased that he has done so ever since.
I like his basketball. Put me in first place. And I got to go to prove it. That's right here.
Head basketball coach Chris Utz can testify to Doug's impressive progress since becoming involved with the Special Olympics.
He is a type of person that learns from every experience that he does, every tournament that he goes to. He's a leader, and he's grown and developed along with his teammates.
Founded by Eunice Kennedy Shriver, the Special Olympics give children and young adults with mental retardation an arena in which to develop physical fitness, demonstrate courage, and experience joy.
It allows the kids to have an outlet and an opportunity for success in sports. It allows them to have the same type of experiences that other kids get outside through Little League and through other organized athletic events, and the Special Olympics offers them the same opportunities.
Mrs. Silva believes the Special Olympics have done more than help Brandy physically. She says they've also given her daughter a zest for life.
I don't care if she gets first or eighth. When she goes out and she does her best and she has a good time and she comes off that apparatus and she's full of smiles and happiness, that's the best part.
Dr. Hedenberg recognizes how Special Olympics have improved Doug's life as well.
He's made a lot of new friends and really enjoys it. I think that's probably the best thing.
One friend I have is Patrick Tweedy. He's from the west side, Santa Monica west side. I always pass the ball to him, and he passed the ball to me. I get a three-point shot.
Making friends seems to be the unofficial credo of the Special Olympics. Unlike other sporting events, it's not only about winning or losing. Camaraderie is the key.
The whole team is totally supportive of each other. It's like a family situation. There's not one win, they all win. When one gets a medal, they're all excited and they all won that medal because they love each other so much as a team.
One of the medals Brandy and the team won this year was for her floor exercise. Doug and his teammates took the silver in basketball. But ultimately, these most special athletes leave with more than simply medallions on chains. They take with them the love, the hope, and the sense of acceptance that can only be described as miraculous. According to Scripture, she was blessed among women for giving birth to the one that would take away the sins of the world and bring peace to all. A woman in Southern California claims to have seen visions of the Virgin Mary and passes along her messages of love and guidance. Just north of California City, thousands flock to a small valley in the Mojave Desert to see a vision of the Virgin Mary. Faithfully, believers and non-believers come the 13th of every month for spiritual transformation and healing from the prayers and blessings from the Mother of Jesus herself.
We came here in August. This is our 5th time being here today. In August we came and I didn't see anything, but my children had saw the Virgin Mary and they cried. And then we came back again in September and we saw the Virgin Mary and I saw her myself. I saw her today. She was real small. She was looking at everybody from the sky.
While some of the faithful can see the apparition, the images and messages from the Blessed Mother known as Our Lady of the Rock, are given to Maria Paula, a pious Catholic from Mexico who first saw the vision in 1989. Her meeting with the Holy Mother was foreseen by her 3-year-old daughter, who at the time was in intensive care with leukemia. She told her mother to look for a sign in the mountains.
I started climbing the mountain and saw a rock. I was going to step on the rock. I wasn't wearing shoes since I wanted to climb quickly. But this rock wasn't a rock, it was a snake. I heard a very nice sound like a fine fabric. Birds were singing, and when I was going to turn around, I heard her voice say, "No, don't look back, only look at me, and you're going to be safe. I am the Lady of the Rock, the Queen of Peace of Southern California." She came on a cloud when I saw her. When I looked over there, the sun was so beautiful. Behind her, a bright ray of light. I could see her face so clearly, her eyes, brown hair, and rosy cheeks. Her nose and mouth were the most perfect things you could see.
At the apparition site, people line up according to their illness, physical, spiritual, and even terminal. Some of those who come to see Maria Paula and hear the messages of the Virgin Mary have claimed miraculous healing. Maria de Mesa, a registered nurse, says her lupus was cured.
Maria Paula prayed over me. And then after that, I told Maria Paula, oh, you know, because I have lupus, you know. And then she told me, no lupus, no lupus. I said, Mama Paula, I have lupus. And she keeps on insisting that I don't have the lupus.
Another woman, Frances Pando, has experienced healing as well.
After I got out of the hospital and I was a little strong enough to come, I came. They brought me by wheelchair and I came 3 times. And after that, I've been coming.
Did a physical change come over her while she was in the presence of Maria Paula?
The first time when the wheelchair, no. The second time, I was able to stand. And then Maria Paula, she prayed on me. She touched me, and I felt heat. And then after that, I started getting better slowly.
People who claim to see visions of the Virgin Mary or other saintly apparitions are put through rigorous testing to determine their authenticity. Father Juan Santilla of Our Lady Help of Christians Church describes the church's position on these cases.
Normally, when it's brought to the particular priest, the individual priest, he will have to see, first of all, that person, how's their family life? Psychologically, their stability, their emotional life. Then what are the things that begin to occur that might give indication that there's a possibility of it being on the part of the divine? And normally you'll find that sometimes humans, there's a tremendous need for attention. There's a tremendous need of being someone and to be in the limelight. There is so much confusion. There is so much neglect. There is so much abandonment. There is so much maltreatment of humans against humans that humans need some of that little supernatural, maybe to make them come back to their senses.
According to belief, the apparition is seen by the devout, or those the Virgin Mary chooses. The Blessed Mother also allows herself to be photographed as a gift.
But then when you have a Polaroid and other regular cameras and different Polaroids, and they're all focusing on the same section, and each one has a different picture of that reality, then you can't help but think, well, something might be happening here.
The strength of personal faith and Maria Paula's healing abilities are tested almost every day. Edward Martinez came from Arizona to confide in Father Juan his terminal diagnosis of cancer.
8 weeks ago, I guess it was, I was diagnosed as having a very rare cancer. It's called thymoma. It's a fast-spreading cancer. And they had told me that if I didn't go through the chemotherapy and radiation, that I'd probably have about 6 months or less. I had just about almost given up. I mean, and I'm not the kind of guy that gives up, but when they told me up there that that's all the time I had left, it's kind of hard to take.
Whether he will be healed remains to be seen.
Feel the heat in your legs. Watch it come up.
It's coming up.
It's coming up.
Yes.
The heat is coming up.
Yes.
You're right?
Yeah.
Hmm?
Yes.
Le voy a dar esta prenda para que la use, ¿ok?
Visions of the Virgin Mary have been occurring for centuries. Only in this century have they become documented and officially approved by the Church. Though Our Lady of the Rock is not yet recognized by the Church, the surprising aspect of the supernatural experience is that the message is almost always the same. It's up to us to decide if we want to listen to it or not.
Repent, my children, because time is short. Our Blessed Mother says we should be careful with our actions, for this will bring you to salvation or the loss of your soul. Let's go with caution, my brothers. Clean up the confusion of our human hearts.
A vision of the Virgin Mary comes to Maria Paula once to 3 times a day. When we talked to her, she claimed the image appeared twice, and a statue of the Virgin wept.
I have to, at this point, play the devil's advocate. I can't say whether I believe it or not believe it. There's many things that I'm beginning to accept. On a truthful basis, I don't need visions. I don't need to see angels. I don't need to see the Blessed Mother. I don't need to see our Lord. My faith is already set, and that's all I need.
Is there living proof of life after death? The number of people who claim to have had near-death experiences is staggering, and their stories are remarkably similar. If this phenomenon is true, what can they tell us about a fear that all of us share, the fear of death?
Well, 100 years ago, because our science at that time was so imperfect, they made coffins with little bells and other types of instruments.
The bells in the coffins were to alert passers-by that the dead might still be alive. In the 1800s, it wasn't uncommon to be wrongly declared as dead. How many were saved? Nobody knows. But today, medical science is more advanced.
In the United States, in England, in most of the Western countries, a person who is brain stem and brain dead is considered dead.
Today, there are people worldwide who claim to have died.
And then all at once, it was just huge mass confusion, screaming and hollering and yelling. And somebody was shoving a tube down my throat. During that period of time, I left this earth. I did pass on. My heart stopped, and there wasn't any bringing me back.
After I had the surgery, that evening I experienced my death and literally, physically died.
They sent for the priest for my last rites. When he got to me, I had already been gone for about 10 to 15 minutes.
Elaine and Betty survived their deaths, but the miracle wasn't their second chance at living, as much as it was the fantastic stories they returned with, accounts of voyages to a world beyond this realm.
My spirit came up out of my body and rose to the ceiling, and I could see my physical self lying on the bed.
And as I rose upward, I found myself in a dense, foggy area. In the distance, I saw what would be like a bright star. When I looked back at the light, then when the light was close enough to me that I could see within it the formation of a man.
Then there was a heavenly host that surrounded all of us as I stood there.
And when he spoke to me and he said, through me, he said, "You have eternal life." And I realized that I was within the presence of my Creator. When he reached out his hand, all of that light just came out and swooped and brought me into it. And I can't even begin to tell you the powerful feeling that you feel, or the magnitude of love that you can feel.
They claim that during their encounter, a supreme being took them on a life review. Their entire lives were put into perspective. Past acts were not negatively judged, but merely analyzed. Some people traveled even further, where reunions with non-physical beings would follow.
There was a river that ran through, and along the river there were trees. And there were probably somewhere about 5 to 7 people or more that were along that water that were waiting. There were 2 women who broke away from the group coming toward me. As they got within about 20 feet or so of me, I realized the one was my dad's mother, and she's been dead since I was about 9 years old. And then the other one was my husband's Aunt Virginia.
I was told that it was not yet my time, that I needed to come back to Earth to be here.
I didn't want to go back. I mean, when you feel that kind of love and you've come out of an earth that's less than perfect, coming back is not what you want to be one of your options. You'd rather stay there where you have all of that.
Of course, I told them in no way was I coming back.
But as reluctant as they were to leave this paradise, the choice wasn't theirs.
Then all at once, it was just as if somebody just dropped me from ceiling height back down, just with a wild thud. I was body slammed back into my body. And I remember feeling on the inside of me such a sense of sadness. Nothing had ever been as important to me as what I had just been through.
If we can believe these wonderful stories, a whole new light is cast over death. Could there really be an ideal world waiting for us when we die? Betty Eady wrote her book, Embraced by the Light, after her near-death experience. An instant bestseller, it seems obvious that people want to believe that life doesn't end with death.
Death does not happen. It does not exist. A transformation is what takes place.
Where do you go initially? I call it the countryside. It's sort of a beautiful environment. Everything you want to talk about is pretty. Leaves, trees, flowers.
A personal experience triggered Dr. Harold Whittison's curiosity. His research on near-death experiences has widened the spectrum even further. Although many people have experienced the near-death phenomena, Dr. Whittison believes that not everybody has come forward with their encounters.
Many individuals who have had these experiences do not share them with their doctors because the doctors basically start looking at them and saying, oh boy, here's another case of oxygen starvation.
It's certainly theoretically possible for a near-death experience to occur. What a near-death experience means from a physiological point of view is a matter of some controversy.
You know, people who are dying actually see what's happening and where they're going to go.
So I think this is not a hallucination or some type of falsification. I think this is real, but I tend to think it's rooted in the physiology of the deep structures of the brain rather than in any transcendental phenomenon.
Say, for instance, we accept that a near-death experience is nothing more than an extraordinary nerve encounter that exists deep within ourselves. How could we possibly explain the detailed similarities in people's stories?
And one fascinating thing is you go across cultures, you go across time, age categories from the very, very young to very elderly, and they all have the same experience.
Like the tunnel, the bright light, these are all very phrases that are commonly used.
Most people seem to see a being emanating light.
The person that meets and greets them may vary depending upon their religious belief system.
But not all people who've had near-death experiences had a glimpse of paradise.
There are people who see what they define as hell.
What is hell? We are taught that hell is fire and brimstone, but experts claim that hell is more a state of mind than a physical reality.
People addicted to alcohol still have the cravings, but they can no longer meet the addictive needs, or tobacco, or sex.
Perhaps hell is being in a black space all by yourself, wandering through a forest.
Although most people have positive encounters, hovering on the brink of death and then returning to a less perfect world is nothing short of mind-boggling. Another question arises. Is there a purpose to this adventure?
Yes, there are select beings here on this earth, select human beings, that are being used in a tremendous way to bring the information that they've received while they were having their experience back to Earth for a purpose. And this purpose, I believe, is for the total awakening of all mankind. The bottom line message that I've brought back is to, above all else, love one another.
And then there's also the comfort a glimpse to this next world can bring to people. When a child dies, the tragedy can rip a family apart.
One beautiful little account was a young girl who was dying. Her family could not let her go. They were pleading with God. The doctors were doing everything they possibly could. And she says, Mom, I can see the heavens are opened up, and little children are coming running out, and they want me to come. They really want me to come to go with them, and I want to go. Please, won't you let me go? And her family finally quit at that point in time praying and decided to let her go. And before she died, she gave each one of them a kiss and thanked them for letting her go.
And if there isn't enough to convince one of the amazing consequences of near-death experiences, suddenly survivors find they have mystical powers after their journey to the celestial world.
We have problems with things like batteries and lights and anything else that holds any kind of electricity, because we have a tendency to draw that energy right out of that thing, whatever it is, including human beings.
Even healing powers and psychic abilities are not uncommon among these people. It is tempting to think that near-death experiences can prove the existence of an afterlife, or even provide us with clues about what the next phase of our existence is going to be.
We actually have always existed and will continue to exist throughout all eternities.
But the end to our life on earth remains a mystery. The only thing we know for sure is that death is inevitable. Maybe we should learn to see it as an adventure. And who better to teach us than the people who've had a sneak preview? Well, thank you for being with us. But remember, if we look for them, we can all find miracles around us. And it does the soul good to acknowledge and applaud the positive in mankind. Let's hope it can continue to prevail.
The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointed my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done in earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts as we forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen. I asked God for strength that I might achieve. I was made weak, that I might learn humbly to obey. I asked for health, that I might do great things. I was given infirmity, that I might do better things. I asked for riches, that I might be happy. I was given poverty, that I might be wise. I asked for power, that I might have the praise of men. I was given weakness, that I might feel the need of God. I asked for all things, that I might enjoy life. I was given life, that I might enjoy all things. I got nothing that I asked for, but everything I had hoped for. Almost despite myself, my unspoken prayers were answered. I am, among all men, most richly blessed. Great and eternal mystery of life, Creator of all things, I give thanks for the beauty you put in every single one of your creations. I am grateful you did not fail in making every stone, plant, creature, and human being a perfect and whole part of the sacred hoop. I am grateful that you've allowed me to see the strength and beauty of all my relations. My humble request is that all of the children of earth will learn to see the same perfection in themselves. May none of your human children doubt or question your wisdom, grace, and sense of wholeness in giving all of creation a right to be living extensions of your perfect love. Dear Jesus, divine physician and healer of the sick, we turn to you in this time of illness. O dearest comforter of the troubled, alleviate our worry and sorrow with your gentle love, and grant us the grace and strength to accept this burden. Dear God, we place our worries in your hands. We place our sick under your care, and humbly ask that you restore your servant to health again. Above all, grant us the grace to acknowledge your holy will, and know that whatsoever you do for the love of us. Amen. Christ be with me, Christ within me, Christ behind me, Christ before me, Christ beside me, Christ to win me, Christ to comfort and restore me, Christ beneath me, Christ above me, Christ in quiet, Christ in danger, Christ in hearts of all that love me, Christ in mouth of friend and stranger. O Lord, I place myself in your hands and dedicate myself to you. I pledge myself to do your will in all things, to love the Lord God with all my heart, all my soul, all my strength. Not to kill, not to steal, not to covet, not to bear false witness, to honor all persons. Not to do to another what I would not want done to myself. Not to seek after pleasures. Not to give way to anger. Not to foster a desire for revenge. Not to entertain deceit in the heart, not to make a false peace, not to forsake charity, not to swear, lest I swear falsely, to speak the truth with heart and tongue, not to return evil for evil. honor the aged, to pray for my enemies, to make peace after a quarrel before the setting of the sun, never to despair of your mercy, O God of mercy. God, hear my prayer, and let my cry come to you. Do not hide from me in the day of my distress. Turn to me and speedily answer my prayer. Eternal God, source of healing, out of my distress I call upon you. Help me sense your presence at this difficult time. Grant me patience when the hours are heavy. In hurt or disappointment, give me courage. Keep me trustful in your love. Give me strength for today and hope for tomorrow. To your loving hands I commit my spirit. When asleep and when awake, you are with me. I shall not fear. O gracious and holy Father, give us wisdom to perceive you, intelligence to understand you, diligence to seek you, patience to wait for you, eyes to see you, a heart to meditate on you, and a life to proclaim you. Through the power of the Spirit of Jesus Christ, our Lord. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be known as the children of God. But I say to you that hear, love your enemies, do good to those who hate you, bless those who curse you, pray for those who abuse you. To those who strike you on the cheek, offer the other also. And from those who take away your cloak, do not withhold your coat as well. Give to everyone who begs from you, and of those who take away your goods, do not ask them again. And as you wish that others do to you, do so to them.